Hello and welcome to Monocle on Fashion, a new show on Monocle Radio. I'm Natalie Theodosi, Monocle's fashion director and your host. This new episode is part of our mini-sode series, Under the Covers, where we take you behind the scenes of our magazine's fashion pages. This week, our sister publication, Konfekt's new winter issue, has just hit the newsstands. So I wanted to speak to Sophie Grove, Konfekt's very inspiring editor, about the fashion coverage in the issue. There's a real focus on fine jewellery in this issue. As you'd expect, there's a lot of beautiful imagery and amazing product, but there's also a wide range of stories that dive deeper into craftsmanship and the deeply personal connections people foster with the jewels they buy, collect, or inherit. Sophie got a group of auctioneers, designers, and curators around a table at the very chic Mount Street restaurant in London to talk about craft, their personal relationship with jewellery, and the future of the industry. So I wanted to ask her about hosting these roundtable discussions, how animated the conversation got on the day, and the value of getting people together over a meal and a nice glass of wine. When it comes to fashion, Sophie also gives us the details on some of the must-read features in the issue, including a profile on Iranian-German designer Jasmine Hezri and a visit to Warsaw Wonders, a multi-brand boutique reflecting the rise of the Polish capital's creative scene. We also chatted about Konfekt's overall approach to covering fashion, the importance of featuring brands that women can actually wear in their everyday lives and not ignoring the element of practicality. Plus, why it's important to talk about fashion in a broader context. Konfekt's fashion stories sit next to an array of other features from design to food, hospitality and entertainment. These are all the elements that come together to create a really unique, charming world that's very distinctly Konfekt. But let's hear about it directly from Sophie.
Our fashion section, we really want the pieces to be wearable. So I think that the Chanel jumpsuit is a really good example because it's incredibly athletic, it's fun, it's red, kind of all in one, and it's very useful. You know, we wanted people to utilise and also be inspired. But then I think because craft is so important to me, and it really is one of the values, so we really want each piece to have an identity, to have a place in your wardrobe, to have a meaning, and not to be necessarily something you wear one season and then set aside. It's about building a wardrobe and doing that in a very mindful way. So I think our readers are looking for that inspiration and looking for those quirky brands. It might be something that we'll find in a little tiny workshop in Slovakia being crafted, or it might actually be a beautiful brand that's employing some wonderful savoir-faire that's almost an endangered species, and we're really trying to support that because I think that those are the things that have emotion, and also those are the things that we really feel that those are the things you reach for when you really looking for strength and reassurance and that sense of confidence in how you feel when you're dressing.
And I think that's why you've managed to build such a charming world around Konfekt that draws all of us in, and we're always asking you to contribute and to be able to write for Konfekt. What you mentioned earlier as well about emotion, about talking about luxury in a much more human way, I think is something that makes Konfekt so special. And you really address it in your Konfekt conversation, which in this issue takes on the subject of jewellery. You've brought together designers, curators, writers to talk about jewellery. Tell me about that. You had an amazing lunch at Mount Street restaurant, right?
Yes, such a beautiful, in the Italian room, sort of surrounded by this amazing sort of Murano glass. And it's so wonderful to do that in London because actually Hatton Gardens and the industry, the jewellery industry is so many hundreds of years old in London. And we had Emma Foucault from the V&A, who's this amazing jeweller but also curator, talking about the meaning of jewellery in humanity, in history. So it's about archaeology, it's about provenance. It's about, how we as humans kind of have always defined ourselves through beautiful things, and whether it was shells and little rocks, in very early antiquity. And I think Annabel Davison starts the conversation talking about Neanderthal sort of excavations, finding jewellery. And it's such an interesting human trait that we gravitate towards beautiful things. And I think that is still relevant in the luxury world today, to reflect on why we are connected to jewellery and rare stones and these things that have taken billions of years to evolve in the earth. I mean, some of it was quite about, childhood memories, and a lot of the jewellers on the panel were talking about their reflections on collecting and discovery, but also inspiration. But then it got quite gritty at one point, and we were really talking about provenance and mining. So we try and deep dive into all the subjects in a way that is intellectual, but not in a, it's not too geeky. But I think that the readers are really looking for that level of depth.
And geeky sometimes can be quite good, right? And I love that with the Konfekt conversation, you pick a subject and you really dive deep into it. You bring in different perspectives. And is that what was the aim when you were thinking about this recurring feature and when you bring different people together?
Well, it's a round table. It's a transcribed round table on any given subject. And I think one of our real passions is really hosting, and it doesn't have to be in the entertaining section, which we also have. It's about, how people really express themselves and how the sparks fly in this alchemy of eating and discussing and debating ideas. So then that's why we have a meal. And actually some of the conversations, the Konfekt conversations I've hosted, they've gone on for hours. People have drunk so many glasses of wine, and sometimes the transcripts are hours long, but in a way, that's wonderful. And I feel people really relax, and the conversation goes to a new level. I mean, sitting around this table is equally lovely, but maybe our conversation will be different.
When wine is involved, it gets even better, right? From conversations to another favorite recurring feature of mine, the Wanderweg, where you take people on a walk, which is another very adventurous, very you format. Tell me about how you came up with that and this issue's subject, which is the Danish jeweller Sophie Gove.
I mean, Sophie is such an amazing artist, really, and I think she shows that side of kind of these wearable sculptures that she's making, but she's strolling around Copenhagen. She's really hunting for gifts. But some of the other Wanderweg interviews, it's kind of a walking, talking interview format, and it recurs every issue, as you say. It's really a kind of Nietzschean idea of that flow state where you're chatting and walking, and how you just end up talking, having these amazing, in-depth, really reflective, beautiful conversations when you're walking, and really kind of in step with the person that you're hiking with. So it's inspired by that moment when you think, wow, this has been a great chat, and you're halfway up a hill. But then I think we also have the urban ramble. It's like the flan air moments where you're just pacing around a city, and that's the landscape. And in Sophie's case, that was where we went.
Anything that surprised you, that inspired you when it came to Sophie's conversation, the things that she had to say? She walked us around one of her favorite neighborhoods in Copenhagen, right?
I think her perspective is really interesting. She says she always felt that she was going to be a creative person, and she was always looking for that kind of conduit to express herself, and I think she found jewellery quite early on. And what's fascinating in doing this jewellery issue is so many of the jewellers knew that was their medium when they were really young. They gravitated towards a certain niche, and I think it made me feel very sort of intrigued by how connected we are to materials, and maybe that's a kind of destiny in a sense, or you obviously create your own trajectory. But it's really interesting that she kind of knew, and then her whole world is this curated and beautiful sort of space. It's not really just the objects, it's everything around her, and she sees everything in a very sculptural way, which is so fascinating.
So you like to get people together around the table over a glass of wine while they're walking, and you really dig deep, right? And I think there's also, like you said, an element of comfort. And in the same manner, the fashion that you show on the pages of Konfekt, there's practicality, there's comfort, and of course, a lot of beauty. And I think that really comes out in one of the issue's fashion stories, which features the Munich-based designer Jasmine Hezri. Tell me a little bit about that. Why did that brand catch your eye and you decided to dedicate quite a lot of real estate in the issue to her? She's a small independent brand, former illustrator. What was interesting about the story?
Well, I came across her collections at Super Mountain Market, which is in St. Moritz, but they're just so tactile and amazing. She's Persian and also German, and I think she has this amazing use of colour in her work. But she's also quite inspired by tract, and she has like this very wonderful sort of boiled wools and this very beautiful kind of Germanic elements. She's also reusing dead stock fabrics, but then also beautiful soft wools from Biella. So I think she's uniting so many things that I really am quite intrigued by. And then just it's almost bespoke. She has her atelier, people can drop by, and then the palette is just so amazing. So we thought it was very of the season, and so we put that as our lead.
It sounds like a dream, and I think when we go upstairs, I might be checking out which jacket to buy and consulting you.
Good.
So we've been to London, Munich, Copenhagen. There's also a trip around Warsaw, which is a city that you visited recently as part of sort of the Monocle ongoing tour of events. And you feature an incredible store, Wonders Warsaw in Motokowska, which is, again, a very beautiful neighborhood filled with these beautiful shops and ateliers. Tell me a little bit about that story as well, and what you make of Warsaw. What was appealing about the city and what you discovered there?
I mean, we have this piece, Buyer's Notebook, because I think often the buyer's role in fashion is slightly unsung, because actually they're these pioneers, and in a sense, as editors, buyers are doing the same thing. They're discovering, they're editing, they're curating, and they have to take incredible risk, and they have to move around the world. So we want to give a sort of slice of their lives on the page with an interview. And we went to Wonders. I mean, I just nipped in there when I was in Warsaw a few months ago. I was so struck by the amazing Polish-made wares. I mean, often you go to shops and you'll find the same brands, and that, obviously there were some wonderful, wonderful brands, but it's tiny bit disappointed when you've flown halfway around the world and you see the same, cast appearing, but that just doesn't happen in Warsaw. There's so much incredible creativity, especially in the area that we're talking about. And I think Wonders Warsaw is one of the high points of that. Every little tiny piece, and we both came back with, I came back with so many different pieces, and Sophia Chilek's bags, and there were these beautiful leather goods and scents. So we sent Stella Roos, our reporter, back to Wonders Warsaw just to get that slice of their perspective and how they find and support all the designers in the shop.
I had a very similar experience as well, and I think it's so nice to see these creatives. Everyone was speaking about feeling a lot more proud about their heritage, about the Made in Poland label, and it does come together on the shop floor at the Wonders Warsaw and the selection, like you say.
And I think it's very inspiring for other would-be retailers to kind of see how somebody who's been working on a collection for 20 years or 10 years, how deeply connected they are to the designers, how they support them through thick and thin, often backing them, launching them. And they're so strategic in the way that they put things together and buy the collections. I think it's really amazing. But in Poland, just the manufacturing, the quality, but also the kind of distinct Polish palette. We're talking about colour, but, there is this wonderful sense of the street style there, is that these big coats, and when it's very wintry, when I was there, it was actually March, but it felt like very, very grey, but people were dressing in this very elegant way, not actually that colourful. And then they're talking about that, the identity of a city, and how it's amazing that collectively we can sort of express a sort of style as a metropolitan whole. And I think that's also why we love the Buyer's Notebook piece, because these are the people who really know the DNA of their customers and how they like to dress.
Exactly. It couldn't be more perfect, I think, to look somewhere like Warsaw and Poland as we head into winter. And just to kind of end, we spoke a lot about your incredible coverage of fashion and jewellery in the issue, but it's not isolated. The whole magazine also looks at hosting. You have incredible stories on culture, entertainment, and I think it's something that might come as second nature to you, but it's quite revolutionary in the women's magazine environment. Even the fact that you put on the cover a fashion image, but next to it there might be a piece of cake or a really hearty recipe. Tell me why it is important in mixing all of these different elements to create this beautiful Konfekt world that we all love.
Well, I think that's where I felt when we were launching the magazine, there was something missing with, the women's genre, that it was so skewed towards beautiful things and style, because I think the women I know are very much more multifaceted than that, and they're interested in culture and current affairs and some really deep dives into issues. But then also they want to be completely inspired and they want to discover new places. It is ambitious, and there's design in there, there's style in there, there's a long section of essays which are really kind of fireside reads that you can delve into, and I think that that's what I want to read, and in a sense I think there's a level of respect for the reader's intelligence in the magazine which I really think people are responding to.
That was Sophie Grove, editor of Konfekt, joining me here in our London studio. And that's all for today's show, our second Under the Covers minisode. Make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for another big interview coming next week. Today's episode was produced and edited by Lily Austin. I'm Natalie Theodosi. Thank you for listening.